Hello and welcome to DM It All, a show where we talk about D&D books and tabletop gaming history. Today we're going to be covering not one but two modules from the Dragonlance setting. We've already made a pair of videos covering the setting's first two modules, which were based off of the beloved Dragonlance Chronicles books from the late 1980s. The series helped transition D&D away from player-driven sandbox treasure hunts towards more story-driven linear world-saving adventures in the vein of Lord of the Rings. While we covered the first two modules already, there are a whopping 14 modules in total from the original Dragonlance line, so reviewing the entire series is something of a pipe dream. But the franchise always remains in our thoughts, so we might one day return to the world of Krynn. Dragonlance was recently released as an official 5th edition setting, so it seemed like a fitting time to revisit the series, especially in the wake of the new Shadow of the Dragon Queen module. We should note that the modules we're covering actually fit into a weird place in Dragonlance history, as their plots weren't included in the original Dragonlance Chronicles books. In fact, they lacked a novel adaptation until 2006, 22 years after the module's release. That book was titled Dragons of the Dwarven Depths, and it was part of the Lost Chronicles series, meant to fill in missing gaps in the original trilogy. But the story beats from these modules did manage to sneak into the Twins trilogy, the direct sequel to the Chronicles books. So the way these stories unfold will likely feel familiar to older fans. The first module we're covering is Dragons of Hope by Tracy Hickman, one of the co-creators of the entire series. The second module, Dragons of Desolation, is a joint effort by Tracy Hickman and Michael Dobson. Dobson worked in several different fields throughout his career, and now works as a speaker for management seminars. He joined TSR in 1983, and was known for editing numerous Dragonlance projects. He also edited the AD&D mass combat rules known as the Battle System, as well as designed several AD&D modules that used it. Dobson eventually became the director of games development before he left TSR in the early 90s. He frequently collaborated with Dragonlance writer Douglas Niles, and the pair will go on to write a few novels together outside of TSR. So with that, let's begin our perilous journey back into the dragon-scorched world of Krynn. As usual, there will be spoilers in this module walkthrough. These will also double as spoilers for the novels, because a lot of these plot points eventually appear in later books. If you want to just skip ahead to our final thoughts, jump ahead to the time shown here. Although we recommend watching our first two episodes on Dragonlance, here is some information for those that need a quick refresher. Dragonlance takes place in the world of Krynn, a standard fantasy setting with some key differences. The biggest of which is the Cataclysm, a tumultuous global event where the gods wreaked havoc on the world before apparently abandoning it. It was brought about by humans demanding more and more concessions from the gods, until the divine beings punished them for their hubris. As a result, humans began worshipping false deities. For hundreds of years after, Krynn was devoid of true clerics that possessed magical abilities. That was until a barbarian woman named Goldmoon revealed she had divine healing powers. During this time, an army of dragon-like humanoids called Draconians began laying waste to the countryside. The heroes in this scenario serve as Goldmoon's companions, protecting her as they flee from the evil Draconians at their back. Dragons of Hope picks up right where the last module ended, with the party escaping from the Draconian fortress of Pax Tharkus. Following them are 800 liberated slaves, and now the party must find a safe haven for this mass of refugees. The first leg of this adventure plays out as a wilderness survival on mountainous terrain, with the twist of having to feed and shelter an entire village of downtrodden souls. The party will need to direct the refugees toward food and shelter and away from the encroaching dragon armies. The armies will slowly move through the map at their own pace, devouring the countryside as time progresses. The party has about a single week to finish this adventure before the dragon armies seize control of every available location. 10% of the refugees are capable of fighting, so abstract rules for mass combat are included. The party will want to avoid militarizing the refugees, however, as any casualties will make the remaining refugees less cooperative. This is in addition to each passing day out in the wilderness naturally turning them uncooperative, making them harder and harder to manage. At the onset of the journey, the refugees will quickly organize a patchwork government amongst themselves. The party can advise this newly formed council, but the bureaucrats are unlikely to listen. Each council member represents a different faction among the refugees, each concerned with their own priorities. One of the council leaders, Eben Shatterstone, is secretly a traitor working for the dragon armies, though he likely won't show it as he's saving his reveal for the next module. The party's best strategy is to drop the refugees off at a random location as soon as there's enough distance between them and the dragon armies. It will be faster and safer for the heroes to scout the map on their own. What they're looking for is a long trail of snowy footprints passing through multiple hexes on the map. This trail leads to an aggressive dwarf village, one that will greet the party with battle until our heroes can prove their worth in combat. The dwarven village will then give the party shelter for the night, informing them that the only escape from the draconian armies is through the kingdom of Thorbarden. Thorbarden is home to a faction of mountain dwarves that have locked themselves away from the rest of the world. No one knows where the dwarven kingdom resides, but it is supposedly found in the tomb of Fistandantilus. The next day, the party can venture to a nearby valley choked with boiling hot steam. The steam spurts out of dangerous vents, capable of scalding anyone that falls into them. In this cloudy valley is an old mine once used as an outpost by the mountain dwarves, and deep inside the hottest section of this mine is a subterranean city built by the dwarves. Characters trying to reach this area will have to take off their armor or risk passing out from the sweltering heat. The steam obscures the path ahead as well, making it likely that the party won't notice the 10 angry ogres hiding out in these tunnels until it's too late. If the party reaches the aptly dubbed Steam City, they will learn that the mountain dwarves no longer occupy this area. It has instead become overrun with filthy, stupid, and immoral gully dwarves, a troublesome subspecies the party will remember from the first module. Despite Steam City having a large map, not much information on the area is provided. This is likely because the party is not meant to stay here too long. The area not only smells terrible thanks to its anti-hygienic inhabitants, but there's only one thing of value here that the party will stumble upon quite quickly. That's because the gully dwarves will be all too eager to show their hidden treasure to their guests, a stone slab engraved with runes that magically responds to any question asked in Dwarven. The gully dwarves have not been able to make use of the stone themselves on account of them being, illiterate. If asked, the slab will reveal the tale of Fistandantilus and the Dwarfgate War. During the Cataclysm, the mountain dwarves cut themselves off from the rest of the world due to the growing number of refugees looking for shelter. Refugees that were both human and dwarven. The refugees did not take this ban lightly, waging a war on the mountain dwarves that became known as the Dwarfgate War. This eventually caught the attention of Fistandantilus, an ancient wizard seeking to prolong his life via magical means. Magic was widely despised in Krynn, but Fistandantilus believed there would come a time when society would view it more favorably. Though the wizard gradually shriveled away over the years, hearing word of the Dwarfgate War reinvigorated him, offering a means by which to regain his lost power. Fistandantilus conjured a magical fortress and rallied the refugees to overtake the mountain dwarves. But the stone-hardened dwarves were no pushovers, able to defeat Fistandantilus in the end. As a petty show of vengeance, the wizard unleashed a powerful magical explosion that destroyed his enemies, his allies, and even himself. His fortress shattered and crumbled, the resulting ruins settling into the shape of a skull. This became known as Skullcap, aka the Tomb of Fistandantilus, as well as the entrance to the home of the mountain dwarves. At this point, the party should leave Steam City in search of Skullcap. As they venture through the land, they will encounter a friendly yet absent-minded wizard named Fizban. And no, this isn't Fistandantilus in disguise, but rather the god Paladine gone undercover. Paladine is the strongest good deity in the world of Krynn, serving as the main opposition to Takesis, the evil deity leading the dragon armies. For the Forgotten Realms folks, Takesis is the Dragonlance equivalent of Tiamat, while Paladine is Bahamut. The party will likely not discover Fizban's celestial secret, however, as the god acts like a goofball. The party will first come across the wizard while he is having a spirited conversation with a tree, and things only get wackier from there. For instance, when the party comes across a broken bridge, Fizban will cast a spell to cross the gap. He will conjure a golden bridge to connect the two broken ends, but once he does so, the rest of the corporeal bridge will collapse around him, sending him, and the party, sliding down the icy mountain slopes. Further down the map, the party is likely to come across Fizban for a second time. The wizard has spent his intervening time constructing a snow fort with hundreds of stacked snowballs. He believes this chilly ammunition to be the perfect weapon to fight off the dragon armies. And unfortunately for the party, the dragon armies will descend upon them during this scene. Once they get close enough, Fizzban's wall of snowballs will luckily collapse on the enemy forces, whilst the snow fort protects the heroes from suffering the same fate. Heading further southeast, the party will eventually reach Skullcap. They will find its appellation to be accurate, as the stalactites and stalagmites form a wall of sharp, menacing teeth. The characters will have to slip through one of the skull's openings and descend down a long cavernous shaft to reach the dungeon proper, preferably with rope, as the mountain surface is too cold and slippery even for thieves to climb reliably. Resting at the bottom of the cave are the ruins of Fistandantilis' fortress. This dungeon consists largely of featureless rooms, peppered with the occasional scripted encounter, but the trek will be far from uneventful, as most of the party's fights will come from the random encounter table. This dungeon also sports not one, but two dragons. The first is a shadow dragon dwelling in a cavern, bound to this location by Fistandantilis to serve as his eternal watchdog. Shadow dragons are different from black dragons in that they can blend into the shadows and cast illusion spells. Their dragon breath also produces a blinding cloud of darkness. It reduces characters down to 25% of their max health, or 50% if they pass a saving throw. Ironically, the non-lethal nature of the attack makes them one of the least threatening dragons to encounter, as the other breeds could one-shot characters even with a successful saving throw. The second dragon is located within an abandoned armory section on the same floor of the dungeon. This brass dragon appears motionless, trapped inside a shimmering gray hemisphere. The hemisphere is easily dispelled by the presence of iron or steel. The dragon's name is Blaze, and he has been in suspended animation for 350 years. Blaze was originally fighting on the side of Fistandantilis, but was frozen in time by the wizard's explosive final spell. Blaze is a good aligned dragon, and wants to find the other benevolent dragons that are still around. Unfortunately, he will not be able to help the party cover the rest of the dungeon, as he is somehow unable to navigate down the ruined staircase that leads to the lower levels. And if the party tries to keep close to Blaze regardless, he will eventually be chased off by Lord Verminard and Ember, his red dragon. Verminard is the main antagonist of the previous modules, and the commander of the local dragon army. Verminard and Ember actually show up as a recurring random encounter for this entire adventure. These two will periodically attack the heroes and any nearby refugees before flying away. Worse yet, the players can't do anything to stop this, because Verminard is a precious NPC capsule. NPC capsules in Dragonlance are characters so important to the plot that they cannot die until the story allows it. An NPC capsule that's slain only suffers a fake-out death, the party unable to locate their body. We should note that story-wise, Verminard was already dead by this point in the novels. That didn't change all that much in the grand scheme of things, as his plot relevance only lasts for these two modules that the novels skipped. When the 2007 novels adapted these two adventures, they simply replaced Verminard with an imposter, which is a much more creative way of handling unexpected NPC deaths. Back in the dungeon, the party will soon come across the most memorable trap in the adventure, a multi-floor invisible maze guarded by a mechanical hydra. To avoid its attacks, the party will have to take cover behind the invisible walls, all while keeping an eye out for the exit. Upon reaching the very bottom of Skullcap, the party will find Fistandantilis himself, or rather what's left of him. He has morphed into a demi-lich, a tremendously powerful undead that has deteriorated to nothing more than a skull. They need not fear him, however, as he only attacks characters that attack him first. The party can simply slip by him to reach the dungeon's treasure hoard, teeming with gold, valuable gems, and the key item to finishing this adventure, the Helm of Growlin. This helm was created for the Prince of the Mountain Dwarves, who died in battle against Fistandantilis. The party can learn this information from Growlin himself, as the spirit will possess the body of whomever dons the helm. It turns out that the magical cap has the power to safely store a person's soul after they die. Growlin will tell the party how to locate the dwarven city of Thorbarden, so that his soul can find a proper resting place. After providing directions, he will then relinquish control back to the character he possessed. But in order to officially complete this adventure, the party still needs to find a safe place for the refugees to rest. An inconspicuous canyon area on the map is actually the best locale suited for this purpose, but the party is unlikely to stop by unless the DM points it out. Once the refugees settle down, they'll hold a celebration, one so big that it carries on into our next adventure, the Dragons of Desolation. One of the refugee leaders, Elliston, was a former cleric for the false deities, but has been converted to a true cleric by Goldmoon. During the celebration, he'll deliver a toast, wishing everyone a safe future. He then drinks from his chalice before immediately dying. Not a great omen. When the party rests for the night, Elliston will show up in their dreams, standing before a large door. He'll allege that he left something important beyond it. Characters that open the door will suddenly find themselves on an empty plain. In the distance stands a tower made of crystal, silver, and white marble. Traveling to the tower, the party will find a dimly lit hallway that fills them with dread as they look upon it. The party then suddenly wakes with no memory as to how the dream ends, a mystery they won't have much time to ruminate on as Verminard and Ember are hovering above the campsite. No, seriously, they have no time to ruminate on it because the Fel Commander mocks them for failing to defeat him in the quote-unquote mind of evil. Upon hearing this strange name, the party will instantly recall the conclusion to their recent dream. As they ventured down that dim corridor, they came upon Elliston held prisoner in a crystal cage with Verminard his jailer. Verminard then summoned countless draconian warriors to battle the party. This module includes dream cards that the DM is meant to hand out to each player based on their character, describing a unique outcome for their hero in this dream sequence. Most of these dream cards are intended for the novel characters, with some of them foreshadowing the fate of key figures. But there are some dream cards that apply to custom characters as well. For example, fighters start panicking during the chaos of combat and accidentally kill one of their allies. Thieves attempt to unlock Elliston's prison, but trigger a trap and die. And magic users will abandon their friends as they instead pursue an ancient magical tome. They will see themselves garbed in black robes, apparel exclusively worn by evil wizards in the world of Krynn. Once this flashback is finished, Verminard will offer the party a chance to join his army. Any character that accepts this offer will later be eaten by Ember the Dragon. If the party rejects Verminard's offer, he will suspiciously leave without any further attacks. Fizban, the dopey wizard, reappears around this point to reveal that he knows the exact location of Thurbarden. Of course, he could have mentioned this earlier, but wizard gods work in mysterious ways. Fizban will lead the party to a secret door located on a narrow cliff face. In order to bust it open, Fizban will cast a fireball spell, which successfully carves out a hole for the party, while simultaneously appearing to obliterate the wizard in the process. Oh well, rest in pyro. The Dwarven Kingdom of Thurbarden is notable not just as a story location, but also as a metropolis. Dwarf cities are fairly uniform throughout, featuring a lot of similar repeating structures, and Thurbarden is one of the largest among them. But instead of laboriously penning a unique map for each district, this adventure utilizes 16 square maps, representing the most common city block designs. Each Dwarven district rearranges these 16 blocks to create a complete blueprint, which the module refers to as crossword puzzle maps. These maps can even be rotated to provide a multitude of combinations. DMs are encouraged to use these building blocks in order to create their own custom dwarf cities. To enter Thurbarden, the party will have to pass through the North Gate, an area primarily controlled by the Darrow Dwarves, a race of evil dwarves that live underground. These should not be confused with the Duergar, which are admittedly identical in concept. But whereas the Duergar are the dwarf equivalent of the Drow, Darrow are a lot paler and a lot crazier. The Darrow are actually the reason why the refugees play a much smaller role in this adventure. If the party travels with the massive caravan, they will be bombarded by Darrow attacks until the refugees decide to retreat. The party won't have to travel completely alone, however, as there is a group of 12 mountain dwarves here that can be recruited. They are investigating the North Gate, led by one Armon Karis, the son of a Hylar councilman. The Hylar are the oldest and most noble clan of mountain dwarves. Most of the dwarven kings of old were of the Hylar bloodline, although there hasn't been a reigning monarch since the Cataclysm. Armon and his soldiers are looking for Armon's brother Pick, who has been captured by the Darrow. Freeing Armon's brother will help improve the party's standing with the Hylar leader. Unfortunately, it won't stop Armon from seeing the party as intruders, as no matter what they do, he'll be adamant on bringing them to the Dwarven Council for judgment. The party may as well cooperate with Armon, as he will personally escort them to the next important destination. Otherwise, they'll have to navigate through the Darrow territory by themselves, and risk fighting hundreds of frothing, bloodthirsty, maladjusted dwarves. The Hylar have taken up residence in the Life Tree, a gargantuan stalactite with a city carved inside of it. The party will journey to the top of the structure via a chain and pulley elevator. Here, the party will be brought before the Council of Thanes, a bureaucratic body representing the 9 dwarven kingdoms. Or at least purportedly, as the council is missing the Hill Dwarves, the faction ostracized during the Cataclysm. The dwarves have kept their faith with the old gods, and blame humanity's hubris for the world's shattering, so they have little sympathy for the trespassing humans and their refugees. The council is willing to allow safe passage if, and only if, the heroes vow to seek out the Hammer of Karis. Inquiring about the hammer will prompt the dwarves to sing the tale of Karis, a noble warrior that left due to the division among the dwarven clans. He prophesies that his hammer would one day reappear to unite the dwarves during an era of great strife. Armon Karis derives his name from the historical figure and believes himself to be the physical reincarnation of the ancient warrior. He will insist on accompanying the party as he feels it is his destiny to unite the dwarves. Before the party embarks, however, the Dwarven Council will demand a hostage in order to ensure their cooperation. The dwarves specifically ask for Eben Shadowstone, the draconian traitor hidden amongst the refugees. And this is no mere stroke of luck. The Darrow councilman is also a secret agent for Lord Verminard, and wants to keep Eben by his side. The party will have to agree with the terms, or carry out the remainder of their days in a dwarven prison. Armon will bring the party to a cable car that leads them to the Valley of Thanes. This is the royal burial site for the dwarves. The main point of interest here is a lake surrounded by a garden oasis. Here, the party will find the Tomb of Gralin, a name which should sound familiar to the host wearing the Helm of Gralin. Placing the helm atop the statue of the prince will prompt the spirit to exposit some info to the party. He'll explain that he is the very same prince that this grave was built for, and that the Hammer of Karis is in the tomb of his father Durkan, the last king of the dwarves. The hitch is that the crypt of King Durkan is suspended 400 feet above this area, and completely inaccessible by ordinary means. To reach it, the party must reassemble a nearby archway that has been shattered into 8 pieces. Doing so will form a magical portal to the floating tomb, the central dungeon of this adventure. As one might expect from a levitating sepulchre, strange magic permeates its walls. The rooms are decorated with beautiful murals, but a thick violet mist obscures the party's visibility. The vapor gives characters a 50% chance to go in the opposite direction of whichever path they choose. There are also several doors randomly hidden behind illusory walls. Yet what really reveals this dungeon's penchant for trolling is that there are no real enemies for the party to encounter. Rather, they'll have to contend with loads of traps. One example is a seesaw bridge that tilts as the party travels across it, threatening to send them tumbling into the abyss below. If the party ventures down to, or falls on top of, the lowest floor of this dungeon, they will come across a moss-covered fountain with an elderly dwarf sleeping nearby. The dwarf claims that he is the Karis that was sung about in legend. After he buried King Durkan, he got trapped in this tomb, unable to find a way out. So he took a sip from the fountain and slept for what felt like ages. In reality, this story is a lie. The Karis of legend died a long time ago after being stung by a scorpion. The party can find his corpse on the top floor of this dungeon, identified by his unique signet ring. If confronted, the imposter will confess that he is actually Evenstar, the guardian of the tomb. All the traps in this dungeon were his doing, intended to filter out those unworthy of finding the Hammer of Karis. The hammer itself is found up above near Karis' corpse. It is a powerful +2 weapon that grants paladin-like abilities, but sadly cannot be wielded until a specific point in the story. As the party prepares to leave Durkan's tomb, they will spot the evil dragon Ember flying toward their location. If the party has not killed Evenstar out of frustration, his conversation with Ember will reveal his true identity, a good golden dragon in disguise. This revelation does nothing to help the party, as Evenstar will stay out of the battle that unfolds between them and the Red Dragon. It may seem like an arbitrary restriction, but there's actually a sinister reason for it. The good dragons of Krynn have made an oath not to interfere with the evil dragons at the behest of Takesis. This is because Takesis holds all of the good dragon eggs captive, wielding them as a bargaining chip to ensure the good dragon's neutrality. And unbeknownst to the good dragons, these eggs have already been corrupted in order to create the draconian armies. As the party fights Ember, the most even star will do is point out a nearby flagpole. But wait, this is no mere flagpole. It's the prototype for the Dragonlance, a legendary weapon used to slay dragons back when they were common. In fact, the Hammer of Karis was made to forge these lances, and its reappearance is prophesied to herald their return. This prototype, however, isn't nearly as powerful as an actual Dragonlance, and Ember is likely to avoid the character trying to wield it. After Ember is defeated, the dragon army quickly descends upon their location. Evenstar will conjure up some magical horses to aid the party's escape before the tomb collapses to the ground. With the dragon armies in hot pursuit, the party will be forced to flee through territory controlled by the Darrow, and unfortunately for them, the Darrow are allied with Verminard. No matter what they do, the party will be overwhelmed by enemies and find themselves captured. That, or they'll be led into an ambush by the treacherous Ebon Shatterstone, located in a nearby prison area. Ebon's cellmate is an old man named Barum Everman, who actually becomes an important character later in the Dragonlance storyline. Barum's appearance here is to simply foreshadow that he's immortal, get it, Everman? As the party will get to see him die and then get back up again. But it would probably be easier for players to make this connection were it not for the NPC capsule system. The party has probably seen multiple NPCs die and come back by this point, so Barum will merely look like another plot armor anomaly. Once captured, the party is taken to the Temple of the Stars, a religious site dedicated to the dwarven god Reorx. Reorx is believed to live deep within the world, so this temple features a massive pit at its center in service to him. This isn't the only temple with a huge chasm either, since for dwarves, the deeper the pit, the holier the temple. The Temple of the Stars is currently occupied by Verminard and 200 Darrow dwarves. Verminard will brag about how he purposefully let the party roam free until this point, all so they could bring him the Hammer of Karis. He plans to use it to crown himself the new monarch of the Dwarven Kingdoms. Verminard then reveals Ebon Shatterstone as a traitor, and orders him to take the hammer from the heroes. But as Ebon lays his hands on the weapon, he is suddenly possessed by the spirit of the hammer. Ebon and Verminard will then battle each other, giving the party a chance to break free from their restraints. The surrounding Darrow do not interfere in this fight, as they view the hammer as a sacred relic. Ebon is destined to die at Verminard's hands, but specific book characters can wield the hammer in his place. If the party is made up of custom characters, they will likely have to rely on Armin Karis to live up to his namesake and strike Verminard down. In a surprising and perplexing turn of events, the spirit of Elliston will also appear to aid the party. It turns out that Elliston did not succumb to poison, but instead had his mind captured by Verminard after a psychic duel. Elliston's spirit will buff the party, granting +2 to their attack and defense rolls, while giving Verminard -2 penalties. After taking enough damage, Verminard will jump into the massive pit behind him, so that he can die on his own terms. Ironically, this is not meant to be a fake-out death, it's the real thing, despite it looking exactly like another one to the players. Regardless of how the fight went, Armand perishes at the end of this encounter. He somehow received a fatal wound, and there is no way to heal it. The party will then have to give the Hammer of Karis over to Armand's father, literally, as the spirit of the hammer will take control of its wielder to hand itself over. Armand's father will then use it to unite the dwarves of Thorbarden, and open up their city to the outside world. The refugees will finally be allowed safe passage through the mountains, provided that they're still alive. Because if the party took too long during this adventure, most of the refugees will have been wiped out by the encroaching draconian armies. Failing to protect the refugees does not change the outcome of the story, but it will inflict massive experience point penalties on the party. Even if the party gets the bad ending, the important NPCs will all manage to miraculously survive. This includes Elliston, who will awaken from his psychic coma. Once the party is through with Thorbarden, the survivors will hold one final celebration. The cleric Goldmoon will take this opportunity to wed her lover, Riverwind. There's also a custom song for this occasion, complete with sheet music if the DM is brave enough to sing it. In our last Dragonlance review, we discussed how the Dragonlance modules have notorious reputations for being railroady and restrictive towards player decisions. For better or worse, these two adventures retain this mentality, with NPC capsules and overly scripted scenes continuing to be front and center. But in general, these are much stronger modules than the last book, Dragons of Flame. This is because the players are given sprawling, unique areas they can navigate on their own, rather than being ushered from one location to the next. However, Dragons of Hope is brought down by the Refugee mechanics. Having to guard and manage a group of displaced people in wild terrain is an interesting idea, but players are likely to find the refugees obnoxious to deal with, demanding considerable attention with absolutely no payoff. Due to this, the party may avoid interacting with the refugees outright, ignoring their presence until they're practically forgotten. Dragons of Desolation seems to acknowledge this fact, reducing the role the refugees play so the party can move about as a core band of heroes once more. Dragons of Hope also suffers from a lack of plot development. The party spends the entire adventure on a side trek, hoping it will point them to their actual destination. Skullcap was likely included only because every D&D module at the time needed a classic dungeon, which definitely makes sense, but begs the question of whether this story had to be split up into two separate modules. In general, Dragons of Hope feels like a lot of setup ending on an ultimately unsatisfying note. Dragons of Desolation, while better, comes with its own faults too, such as the clunky dream sequence. This scene is overly scripted, with very few decision points for the players to make. Cryptic dreams and psychic prisons are both interesting concepts, but they feel wasted here, given that removing the dream sequence has barely any impact on the overall adventure. The party receives flashbacks to this dream sequence when approaching Verminard at the end, but outside of that pivotal encounter, the sequence matters just about as much as the refugees. Dragons of Desolation is more scripted than Dragons of Hope 2, especially near the end. Some railroading is necessary for there to be a coherent plot, but it's always an uncreative sign when the plot demands the party be captured or that their NPC ally has to die. Dragons of Hope and Dragons of Desolation are solid adventures, but they fall short of Dragonlance's first module, Dragons of Despair. There are some annoying bits of railroading, the dungeons are not nearly as iconic, and these adventures don't feel as eventful, especially if run individually and not as a pair. But the silver lining of these modules is that they provide plenty of tools for the dungeon master. Not only are there plenty of decent maps, but they also provide a unique method to generate new maps on the fly. These modules might even work as standalone adventures removed from the Dragonlance universe. They are largely Dwarven-centric, making them easy to lift from one universe to the next in case you're in need of some ancient Dwarven ruins. In general, we feel that a good D&D module should be somewhat flexible, even if it might require some improvised creativity from the dungeon master every now and then. Without it, you might miss some truly memorable, laugh-your-ass-off moments of role-playing, most often found off the beaten trail. Rails.